This story begins with a story about one of the 3 best hunter training schools in the world, called Valhalla. Every year, countless applicants apply to be honored to bear the name of this institution and defend its values. This institution had a very tough selection process with 500 people competing for one place. Each time there are a lot of applicants, but no more than 150 students will be able to graduate from this institute. Everyone was dressed in a prestigious business suit because it was a very strict educational institution, and their rules must be respected and followed by every student. The students were divided into pairs, and each pair had a separate place to fight. A teacher or selection supervisor had to watch this performance. This time, it was a Valhalla instructor of the highest rank, Lemur. He noticed that this time there were even more students than last year. While he was watching the competition, he was approached by a descendant of the Yushin family, Mijun. Lemur turned to him and said that there were always enough applicants during the selection process. And then he asked Mijun if he had come to see his niece. He said that he had come for that very reason. He had to postpone important things. Their family had very high expectations of him and so on. The instructor began to recall all the information about this girl. She was a genius who was born into the Yushin family, one of the best families in Korea. At the age of 10, she was able to use mana on a level playing field with high school students. At 13, she managed to catalyze mana into her own sword. At the age of 16, she was on a par with the rest of the Yushin family, and as a result, she was able to become a leader among them. Was it written in the archives with her personal data, or was there something else he didn't know about? They said it could interact with the constellation of their family's patron saint. Lemur listened attentively to Mijun, but all the facts about the girl could not fit together in his head. If he was telling the truth, then we should really expect something crazy from him. The reason why there are 5 families in Korea is due to the guardian constellations. Usually, the hunter receives a blessing or makes a contract with them, but the guardian constellations of the top 5 families are different from the rest. The constellation of the Yushin family was proficient in the art of the sword and passed their techniques down through the generations. A constellation of the Shanzan family, a sacred spear that had the ability to quickly concentrate mana. The constellation of the Choijin family. Their power lay in their knowledge of various techniques, New and Old Testaments. The constellation of the Osun family, who were invincible in close combat with their fists. And the constellation of the Dojun family. They were considered masters of the bow. The arrows they shot were capable of moving the earth. Members of each family received blessings from their patron saints and were endowed with greater abilities and talents than others. There was a big difference between receiving a simple blessing and direct contact with a constellation. Communication with the patron god is based on a contract with him. If all this information was correct, then this girl is simply brilliant. The uncle asked Lemur how his niece was doing now, but apparently she hadn't started her fight yet. Now that he looked at the area, it was likely that she would start in 30 seconds. If that was the case, Mijun decided to stay and watch the girl's actions. But the instructor said that if he wanted to see it in person, he should go downstairs. He had to go through all the scouts and reporters. To make it easier for him to see, Mijun asked to put the fight on the screen, because Lemur was his senior. But since he was also curious to see it, he listened to Mijun. He used the system to display the Soan qualifying fight on the big screen. She was as focused as could be, the eldest daughter of the Yushin family. Soan was only 17 years old. Her opponent was a boy about whom there was no information, only that he was also 17 years old. Mijun thought that this was because the enemy had already lost morally when he found out who his opponent was. Every second person in the whole country has heard about this girl's abilities. He was behaving very strangely before the fight. He seemed to have a complete lack of fighting spirit even without this. Mijun was sure that this would be over quickly, and they would not need to look at this talentless guy anymore. The countdown to the start of the fight had already begun. Soen took out her weapon. Meanwhile, the guy looked like he had just woken up and got out of bed. Meanwhile, the girl was waiting for the decisive signal to start attacking. As soon as the competition started, they ran at their opponent. She looked very confident and nothing could break her concentration. She used one of her new techniques to destroy her opponent. With the help of her sword and energy storage, she struck the first blow in this battle. At such a young age, she had such a graceful way with a sword and exceptional control over the flow of mana. The guy stood still to the last. Before he was hit, he had a very small smile on his face, as if he was ready for this blow, and knew how to defend himself. Lemur was both scared and shocked. Mijun seemed to have lost the ability to speak and showed only emotions. Even the reporters and journalists were not expecting this, because everyone knew about this girl's abilities. This guy's name was Kim, and he defeated the strongest participant in this qualifier with a single punch. He was surprised why everyone was so weak. This was definitely the future that came 300 years later. 300 years ago, things were very different. At the Tower of Destruction, this boy fought one-on-one. He faced an opponent 10 times stronger than anyone else in the selection. Kim fought against the boss of the Tower of Destruction and defeated him, but the smile on the boss's face did not disappear. Kim was a martial arts god, so his powers were not comparable to the rest. After a short pause, he made a decisive kick right in the face of the boss. He used it to confirm his boss's words that it was a really great fight. He fell to the ground and lay still forever. He had a system that sent him notifications after each task. This time, he defeated the boss of the Tower of Destruction, and thus stopped the collapse of the world. But the tower itself began to collapse because he killed his boss. He did not expect such a result. His body was stiff and he was also heavily wounded. And he wanted to finally relax. He was always busy with something, and he worked as a hunter since childhood. It was when he earned a little money and achieved recognition that this trouble happened to him. He wondered if he should have called his students for help, but he knew the answer to it. He believed that these were his problems, so he had to solve them himself. If there was one thing he couldn't argue with, it was the enormous strength of this bastard. Even if he had called them, they would have died just like him. Kim lay on the ground and smiled until his last breath, until a pile of stones fell on him, which put an end to his existence in that world. He woke up after his death and couldn't think straight, because he didn't know what had happened to him. Kim was reincarnated in the body of a 17-year-old boy, 300 years after the fall of the Tower of Destruction. In any case, he was satisfied with his position for a while, even though his body was much weaker. At the same time, his knowledge and experience that he had gained when he was a martial arts god had not disappeared. If only he could get used to this body, Kim thought that this time, he would be able to live his life in luxury, doing nothing, until this transparent window appeared. That was his goal. He received a message that in 5 years there would be a Tower of Destruction, and he needed to get ready. He felt as if he was offended by it. I should have left that bastard to his fate when I had the chance. But there was no point in talking about it, because he couldn't influence the past anyway. This time he was determined to destroy the tower once and for all. And then he will finally be able to start the life of his dreams, and bathe in wealth, and do nothing. He again received a notification that he had to return the weapons and memories. They were on the 3rd floor of the 5th room of Valhalla. He knew what kind of weapon he was talking about, but hadn't he recovered all his memories earlier? Looks like he'll have to find this Valhalla. Meanwhile, Valhalla was on day 4 of the competition for the top 10. People who wanted to take part in the competition had to go to the competition site. He began to hesitate before going out to fight. But I still had to do it to complete the task. Reporters and journalists were very excited to see this super newcomer again. Lemore noticed that there were a lot of people there. It was because representatives of all 5 families were on the competition ground at the same time. But in addition to them, the currently undefeated rookie was also present again. His name was Kim, and he was treating this competition with arrogance, as if he could beat everyone. This time, his opponent was a representative of another famous family. He was the eldest son of the Osun family, Sehek. He knew it was the same guy. He was able to defeat Soin on the first day, but he didn't look like a strong guy at all. But for him, it was even better. If he can beat him, his reputation will grow significantly. Kim prepared for the fight with the same face as before. Seek promised him that he would destroy him so quickly that he would not even have time to realize it. Kim was laughing at him and didn't understand what he was trying to tell him, because his diction was completely unintelligible. The guy said he would knock him out. In this case, Kim is forced to take a strong stand against him. Sehik did not understand what the guy meant at all. Kim said that this means the end of his career as a fighter and his participation in this competition. Sehik is the eldest son of the Osun family. He was also 17 years old. He wasn't very good at literature, strategy, or martial arts, but he had a talent that was beyond the rest. It was his unsurpassed physical form. Compared to his peers, he looked like a killing machine. His physical strength alone enabled him to do things that others would never have been able to do without the use of his mana. And a little training helped increase his strength exponentially. He was born with a first-class physique that required no effort to perfect. He was worthy of being called a genius for that alone. He was able to crush any enemy with his strength. But Kim had much more advantages over this powerful guy. He told him to get out of here if he wanted to stay safe. But Sehik couldn't put 2 words together to answer him, so he decided to use his abilities to answer. So I jumped on the guy to show him what he could do and get even for what he said. With Kim's new body in direct physical contact, he would not be defeated. He didn't know what level his other skills were at, but his strength was top-notch. But his physical superiority did not mean that he could win. He is fully invested in each of his strokes, so you can use this to your advantage. If you use martial arts in conjunction with this physique, it would be a very noisy mixture, but he is not capable of that. The guy dodged his every blow, and he continued to use up his stamina. He didn't use any strategies or tactics. Sehik just ran at the enemy with the idea of attacking him as hard as possible. While he was dodging his blows, Sehek lost more than half of his stamina, and it was a good opportunity to observe his strengths and understand what he is capable of. Now it was Kim's turn to show his strength and attack him. He made it look much more convincing and effective. The guy fell from one clear blow to the head and could not get up anymore. If all the components of a fighter are not in harmony, then something like this happens. Even though his body was weaker than what he had before reincarnation, he shouldn't have any problems hunting monsters. Kim just calmly turned around and walked off the competition floor. The whole association watched this unique fighter. No one had any information on him, but he impressed them more and more at each battle. Sehik was outmaneuvered and struck while he was conducting his attack. None of them thought that Sehik would be dealt with using such a simple technique. Among these experts was the boy's father. The head of the Osin family, Chushin, thought they were stupid idiots because it was obviously not a conventional technique. Even though his son never showed any desire to learn martial arts, but only worked on his physical form, he could easily dodge the fist of any of his peers. But it was something he couldn't avoid. His emotions overcame his common sense, and he simply attacked his opponent. In addition, he used magic, which he rarely uses, to end the fight faster. But Kim only tilted his head slightly to dodge the blow. Since he believed that Kim would definitely be hit, he completely shifted his center of gravity. And Kim was able to knock him down with a simple kick, even though he was 3 times his size. All he had to do was recognize his strengths and counterattack. So he was moving faster than Sehek. From the moment Sehek entered the set, Kim already had a plan in place. Of course, it was a crazy talent to analyze the enemy to such an extent. He decided to wait for him at the exit to see him with his own eyes and talk to him. But unfortunately, there were many others who also realized the value of this super newcomer's skills. He watched him through a large screen in his office. The man said he would try to bring him into the family by any means necessary. The next time he went to fight, he was met differently. The whole audience was there just to see Nunu. They were all in love with her. Kim didn't understand how they could afford to look at a 17-year-old girl, even after serving in the army. It was the final battle of the ranking matches of this competition. His opponent was Erin, the second daughter of the Choi-jun family. Their fight started and the girl was in full combat readiness. Kim waited for her to start attacking him. But nothing happened. She stood still, just like he did. In the first minute of the match, they did not come even an inch closer. And then he realized that Erin was waiting for him to attack, to defend and counterattack. She is at least trying to read and analyze the situation. This already makes her better than the other teenagers before her. Then he wondered whether he should take the first step, because he was a man after all. And he walked toward her with his casual gait. He even wondered how she would act in such a case. Because Kim didn't know what to expect from Erin. She immediately grabbed her weapon and began to activate the energy storage. The audience was shocked that the girl had the ability to replace the elements of the Choi-jun family at the age of 17. All the children from the 5 families are simply amazing this time. He was waiting for her to make a move in response. His task was to wait until she showed what she could do. She decided to attack him unexpectedly, as it seemed to her, and to attack him. She pulled out her sword and used her ability, which was admired by the entire audience. It struck its blow. But Kim was expecting him, of course, so he was able to dodge, that Erin didn't even notice where he went. She showed him with her eyes where she was going to attack, and it was very easy to dodge such an attack. He walked behind her in one motion and disappeared from her sight. He waited specifically for her to notice him so that he wouldn't attack the girl from behind. And then he just struck one of his blows. The girl suffered some damage, but managed to stand on her feet. Kim was surprised that she was able to defend herself against the attack. She used her weapon for defense and offense. Therefore, she did not sustain any injuries, only lost balance with her body. She managed to dodge it thanks to her sword. It was no wonder he didn't feel like he had hit her. Her stamina was dropping very quickly, and her body was shaking after the defense. Kim came very close to her and put his hand on the sword. He realized that the girl had lost almost all her strength, and now he wanted her to try to dodge his next blow. He took just one step forward, but the blow was very strong. It first flew into the air 2 meters above the ground, and then she collapsed like a defenseless girl. Kim was not satisfied with his attack this time. He felt that something was definitely not the same as usual. His posture was slightly distorted by the impact. But it didn't matter, because he won the entire tournament and got a place in this institution. He was the top one out of all the students who entered this institute. After the competition, he decided to go home or grab a bite to eat. But as soon as he left the competition grounds, he was surrounded by reporters and journalists. He was also harassed by representatives of guilds with various offers to join their associations, promising the best conditions. He was very annoyed and started to get angry. Kim asked them to leave him alone and not to be so intrusive. Kim was considered unbalanced because, after winning the competition for membership, he went crazy and humiliated everyone when they wanted to interview him and invite him to their guild. It was the first day of school at Valhalla. Only the strongest students gathered here. They lined up and listened to the greetings from the teachers and staff of the school. As they talked about how proud Valhalla is of its centuries-old history, Kim almost fell asleep from boredom. He noticed that other students were constantly looking at him. But when he turns to them, they immediately hide their eyes from his gaze. Was he really able to stand out from the crowd? But in any case, he had a task to find his weapons and memories. The system told him that they were in Valhalla. He just needed to get in and out. It shouldn't be a problem. Finally, they finished the welcoming ceremony for the new students. The former head of Valhalla's instructors, Lee Gun, was unhappy that the students were distributed in this way. In the first line was Soen from the Yushin family, and next to her was Aaron from the Choijun family. This giant was right in the center. Sehik from the Osun family. They promised that the students would be assigned to classes in a random order. He did not believe that 3 geniuses could accidentally end up in the same class. Then he turned his gaze and saw another guy. It was Kim who defeated all 3 of these geniuses without any problems. The instructor didn't understand why he was also there. This year he was just in trouble. But he decided to try to calm down. In situations like this, he has to stay strong and not give in to emotions. Lagun greeted the students and said that he was very happy to see them. He introduced himself as the person in charge of their class, as well as their personal instructor. After that, he reached for his keyboard on the desktop and pressed an incomprehensible button. Something strange began to happen in the classroom. It was as if the walls and furniture began to move. They moved to another place thanks to the instructor. Kim was very calm as usual, but he also did not understand why they had moved here. Ligun had an idea of its own. It prepared something special for new students. He decided to demonstrate a little bloodlust. He summoned many monsters for them, consisting of orcs and trolls. There were really a lot of them in relation to students. They completely surrounded them from all sides, and it was impossible to escape. Sahik was calm. He realized that they were orcs and goblins, and rated them at most 100. They looked very hungry and ready to attack anyone. This crowd of monsters started running toward the students, but they were stopped by a strong shield that blocked their way to the disciples. They jumped on the shield, tried to punch it, some even tried to chew it. But all these attempts led to nothing. The instructor was smiling, so everything was going according to plan. He wanted to test how reliable this barrier was and how long it would be able to hold off monsters. While the creatures were trying to break through the barrier, Ligun called Kim over. He approached him and expected to hear something interesting. The instructor asked him if he could handle these monsters alone. The guy decided to clarify whether he meant those running behind the dome. Kim said without hesitation that he could do it without any problems. Ligun thought that with this, he could scare the new student. Most students have only seen real monsters in books, but never met them in person. So he expected Kim to be scared. He wanted the boy to stop pretending to be thinking. The instructor wanted to eradicate this arrogance from his classroom and then start a normal lesson. The boy saw the teacher's reaction and laughed. He was very angry because he expected a completely different reaction. Looking at the way he was smiling, he thought that Kim would be able to deal with them on his own and without any help. Ligun believed that this boy continued to bluff. But he wasn't going to do it just like that, because they're not supposed to do it on the first day of their studies. Seeing how he's trying to test it, it was logical to get some kind of reward for it. Although there was no prize in their terms, Ligun offered to discuss it now. He asked what the instructor was willing to bet that he would not be able to handle these monsters. Ligun said that if he could handle them, he would do absolutely everything within his authority. The guy thought about such an attractive offer. Although it sounded quite hypocritical, he agreed. Ligun said that he doubted that the monsters in this system were any different from the real ones. Kim asked for less talk, and just to give him a sword. Because how else could he fight them? Did he really think that a guy would confront monsters with his bare hands? The instructor agreed and began to draw his own sword. After that, he handed it to the boy. Kim looked at the sword for several minutes and tried to figure out what it was made of. Ligun opened the barrier, and the boy started to go out to the goblins and orcs for a fair fight. The instructor was sure that he would not succeed, and that he was just another arrogant little student. All the students in his class were watching him closely, especially the girls he had defeated a few days earlier. He raised his sword and prepared to fight the monsters. A few seconds later, he was destroying them one by one without stopping. Kim had no doubts about his abilities, even though he was in the body of a young, weak boy. In his hands, the sword turned into a meat grinder for monsters. They were attacking him from all sides, but it didn't cause any problems for Kim. He skillfully wielded the sword as if it were his own weapon. It didn't take long for more than half of the orcs and trolls to be destroyed. It had been 300 years since he had held a sword in his hands. In those days, monsters caused unreal chaos in the world, and they used any object as a weapon. But for him, the sword has always been something special. While he stood still and enjoyed this moment, an orc attacked him from behind, but the guy noticed it, and he just took a step to the side. The monster attacked quite primitively. As he had guessed, the pattern of their behavior is quite simple. Although real monsters were not very strong either, these were just fakes. The students could only stand behind the barrier and watch Kim. The most surprised was the instructor, who argued with him. He had no magic and no boosters, and how he was able to destroy them so easily. It looked as if the sword itself attracted monsters and made them jump on the weapon. Aaron watched him very carefully, but there was a thirst for revenge and hatred in her eyes. Zeke couldn't look away either, but simply out of surprise and admiration. So walked closer to the barrier to see its movements and attacks. He destroyed all the monsters, and his stamina did not decrease at all. When he finished, he asked me to come down to the room as a reward. Kim calmly hid the sword because all the goblins and orcs were dead. This did not deter him from using a lot of effort. He hoped that Lee Gun would fulfill their promise that they had talked about before the battle. The man was silent because anything he tried to say would look like an excuse. All the lessons lasted quite a long time. It was already getting dark outside. Lagoon announced the end of the class. It might have been difficult for the students for the first class, so he suggested that they go to their rooms and rest. Kim looked like a squeezed lemon, and it was only the first day. He did not understand how one lesson could be so long. He just wanted to take what he needed and leave. Kim has never thought about teaching anyone. He never went to school himself. Although this lesson was boring, he learned some information from it. For example, a story about one of his constellations. In his past life, there were no such things as constellations. Constellation is a term used to describe the reincarnation of those who have previously experienced a large concentration of good fortune into gods. Most of the constellations are connected to hunters through sacred relics, which endow them with extraordinary powers. Valhalla in Korea is the third largest academy in the world, which houses a large number of their relics. But the rest of the information regarding fencing and tactics for destroying monsters is nonsense. He needed to go to the dormitory and take up martial arts seriously, because the body he had now was very weak. While he was thinking about which training method to choose for himself at first, So crept up on him unnoticed, but she was very shy. Meanwhile, in the teacher's lounge, Lemore showed sympathy for Lagun.it was the hardest first day in years. But he replied that it was more ridiculous than difficult. It was illogical. He couldn't stop thinking about Kim. Lagun thought that this guy most likely got to them somehow from high school. This time, in the virtual battle simulation room, he created about 120 monsters with the help of inspiration. But he just destroyed them. Even if he was from high school, he couldn't handle monsters so confidently because in high school, they don't throw in real trolls and orcs. Ligun was trying to explain exactly what he did with his sword, which had no mana or energy. Based on what Lemore knows, Kim had nothing special going for him, and that makes the situation even stranger. There were no noteworthy stories in his past either. He was an orphan. He came from a small orphanage in a very dangerous neighborhood. Perhaps he was just a falsifier. Lemur conducted his own small investigation, which confirmed all this information. So he is definitely not a liar. Besides, it would be very stupid for a faker to enter Valhalla and make such a fuss at the entrance ceremony. In addition, Kim asked the instructor for access to the constellation room. Although after the semester is over, he would be able to get there without anyone else's permission. If he asks the principal, he will most likely get permission to go down there. Lemur was the one who brought him here, so he had no less responsibility. He didn't know anything about the completely closed area on the 5th floor, but anyone can get to the ground floor. Therefore, there will be no problems if he gets there a little earlier than allowed. Ligun was worried about what the next year had in store for them. Lemur asked if it was because of Kim. He replied that it was also because of him. There are 3 other students in his class, besides him, from famous families. Lemur didn't try to console him, but an exchange student from the Ventrik family was assigned to another class. Yes, it was the guy from their family, Rockdil Ventrik. He had heard that he had been expelled from the British Academy for some reason. Ligun calmed down a bit after the first day of school. After this information, he begins to think that everything is not so bad. Kim, who had met Aaron outside the academy, stood waiting to hear from her. But she just stood there looking at him because she was afraid to speak. Then he took the initiative and asked her what she wanted from him. She could barely get a word out. She was able to pull herself together and asked Kim to teach her fencing. Kim was not expecting this from the girl he had humiliatingly defeated at the selection. She said that the skill he demonstrated with the monsters was amazing, and she asked him to teach her how to do it. But the guy did not hesitate to refuse the girl's request. Aaron really wanted to learn these techniques from Kim. She asked him why he refused. The guy replied that he just didn't want to do this routine. If she has nothing else to say, then it's time for him to go home and train. But the girl was persistent and asked again to teach her fencing, although she was refused. Kim was getting angry because he said he didn't want to do it. Doesn't she clean her ears so much that she can't hear the people around her? He had no desire to teach anyone, so he asked me to leave him alone. After he said that, the guy just turned around and walked away. She was upset because she really wanted to learn a new technique. It was the second day of classes at Valhalla. The students were gathering outside the academy. Kim was already in class while the rest of us were getting ready. He thought about his plans and how he could get out of this place as soon as possible. Because every day he disliked it more and more. He expected something like this from his body, but it was better than he had previously guessed. But he couldn't learn new martial arts because he didn't have any magical powers, and he had trouble controlling his mana flow. But the problem with magic can be solved if he finds what he's looking for. And for that, he needs to accumulate a certain amount of mana. Suddenly, a boy from a parallel class approached him. He came with his maid. He was from the main line of the Ventrik family, Rockdil Ventrik. His maid was called Yuria de Felix. She was like a prisoner of this guy. He came very close to the desk where Kim was sitting. The guy asked who was standing in front of him and why he came to him. He doesn't even know his family. He introduced himself and said that he had come here to ask a direct question. He reached out his hand and asked if he wanted to become even stronger than he is now. In most families, it is much more difficult for people from the secondary family branch to achieve power and recognition than those who belong to the main family branch. But the Ventrik family owns a mask with a beak. It is a relic of one of the constellations. Usually, a constellation of S-class or higher has a guardian who is the direct protector of the family. And it is they who choose those who will become a constellation, giving them the necessary strength and protection. But the Ventrik family decided to contract directly with a member of their family, who had not yet been chosen by the constellation. This was the only way for the chosen person to contract with the constellation without any misunderstandings. Thanks to this decision, the Ventrique family became the most influential in Europe. Being a member of the Ventrique family meant that anyone could be chosen to sign a contract, regardless of their background. That is why even the side branches of the Ventrique family had the same power as the main one. Rockdale, who belonged to this family, was expected to be very boring. But not long ago, something unpleasant happened in his life. Due to the chaos in the British Academy, he was expelled without the right to reinstatement. But he didn't care. He didn't get upset over such trifles. But he had a wonderful maid who was ready to do anything for him. He always gets what he wants anyway, even if he was expelled. Given the family he comes from, they will always find a way to get him back. He was completely satisfied with this life. The status and reputation of his family could solve any of his problems. And in most cases, no one even wants to argue with him, and they find a compromise in favor of Rockdale. He planned to recruit Kim, who had attracted attention at the welcome ceremony. If he obeys Rockdale, he will guide him to the Ventrique family constellation. Kim barely listened to his nonsense and asked if he was an idiot. This answer made the guy think. He was shocked. No one could afford to speak and treat him like that. Rockdale asked how he dared to answer like that. Kim asked not to consider him stupid, because he realized from the very beginning that he was just showing off from the moment he appeared, and he was not interested in Kim at all. If he started behaving like that, it was logical to realize that he was an idiot. The guy started to get very angry and called him all sorts of insulting things. Lemur's instructor interrupted their conversation and asked the boy to return to his seat. He turned and started yelling at the teacher that no one dared to tell him what to do. He got into an incomprehensible argument that got the whole class paying attention. Lemur replied that this was not a British Academy, no matter how influential the Ventrique family was. He was obliged to obey the local instructors. He calmed down a bit and realized that he was facing a Valhalla combat instructor. The guy was very angry, but he did not dare to say anything in response. He turned around, took his maid, and they left. Before leaving the classroom, he promised that they would meet Kim soon. Kim looked at him and did not understand his behavior at all. And so the next school day at the academy ended. Kim didn't learn anything new. He didn't learn any useful knowledge about the constellation room. And instead, he had to face some idiot in the morning. Now he knew that the guild scouts were the outsiders, who were always hanging around the school's doorstep. They didn't even use the teachers and students to find out where he was. This time, as he was leaving school, someone approached him again. She did not invent anything new and simply asked me to teach her fencing again. The guy was surprised that yesterday's rejection was not enough for her. Then we move on to the academy's dormitory. Rockdale lived in one of the upper classrooms. It was very well built, and its design was worked on for many days. Every detail was perfectly combined with the rest of the items in the room. The guy was still very angry after today's conversation with Kim. He broke the lamp because of his uncontrollable aggression. The boy could not allow some orphan to humiliate him in front of the whole class and his maid. He asked Yuria to contact Desara. He needs him to deal with this ignoramus. Rockdale was very angry. He just wanted to destroy this guy. He asked the assistant again, but she did not answer. She was standing there, as if she was also thinking about something. Rockdale was not satisfied with this and grabbed her by the hair. And he said that, when he addressed her, she should answer immediately. Does she still consider herself the eldest daughter of the palace family? If this is true, he will be forced to throw her out of their family. He grabbed her by the hair with all his might and threw her to the floor like a rag. He reminded her of his order to contact Desara. He also asked me to tell the son of a rice family, who is in the 2nd grade, that Ventrique would like to see him. Meanwhile, Kim was in his dorm room and continued to train and strengthen his body. For the strength he has, he needs to pump his body so that he can use it to the maximum. He meditated and practiced concentration every day. But it was very difficult for him. His body refused to withstand such loads. It was very weak, and he could not get even a particle of magic with it. The guy froze in place and remembered the moment when Erin asked him to become her teacher. She followed him to the dormitory. Her character was quite stubborn, and she refused to accept that Kim had rejected her. She is not used to being rejected. When they were almost at the dormitory, Kim asked how much longer she would follow him. She kept repeating the same thing like a parrot. Soan annoyed him a lot, and he needed to get rid of her somehow. He came up with an answer that would make her leave him alone. The guy said that one lesson from him would be worth 10 million. The girl tilted her head and began to think. Kim was sure she wouldn't be able to afford it, so he wanted to go to his room in peace. After a long silence, she asked the guy for his phone. He was surprised and could not understand why she needed his personal phone. He took his phone out of his pocket and gave it to the girl. She took it in her hands and said she would write down her phone number, because it will be much easier for her to transfer money to him. Kim was shocked. He wanted to get rid of her, but the girl was so stubborn and determined that she agreed to the provocative proposal. He decided to unlock his phone and check his account, and 100 million was transferred to it a minute ago. She sent him money for 10 training sessions and now hoped he would start training her. But the guy refused again and started rejecting the transaction. At that moment, he was really shocked. How could an ordinary student transfer 100 million in one payment? If he had started teaching her, he would have had to reveal all his secrets. It was such a large amount of money. But now it doesn't matter. The matter is closed. It's just money, which has no value to him. All he has to do is find what he needs, even if he has such a small amount of mana. As soon as it got dark, he got dressed and went to the exit. He tried to move very quietly so that no one would notice him. Kim took some tools and a backpack with him. He went to the academy at night, but he did not know how many guards were there and where they were located. He decided to take a shortcut and went through the forest. Before entering this school, he first checked it out. But most of the records that were hidden 300 years ago were destroyed. According to his investigation, there should have been at least 4 recordings left by now. But most likely, there are only 3 of them left. And the most important thing is that they were hidden in the Valhalla Mountains. He stopped and looked around. Then he put on his hood and went in search. He activated his mana, which he managed to accumulate in order to understand the location of the records. He can locate it by feeling the marble, using the small amount of magic now concentrated in his body, and he can still sense the location of the first record. He was clearly shown where the point where the records were hidden was located. He could see it clearly in front of him and was ready to start excavating. This place was very well shown for understanding. He took a shovel out of his backpack and started digging. But again, his body failed him. His endurance was decreasing very quickly. If he had known it would be so hard, he would have buried it in an easier place. If the tower had not been destroyed 300 years ago, there would have been no need to do something like this. The world was on the verge of destruction, and there was no room for his riches. He hoped that they were safe and sound inside. He had to dig a deep enough hole to find these records. They were located about 3 meters underground. But he still had to find the keyhole. Kim started feeling around the perimeter of the dug hole with his hands and found it. He didn't have the right key, and a regular one wouldn't do. He was going to create a magic thread with which he could open this lock. The guy will form the necessary key from it, and he will try to use it for this lock. He was pleased with the work he had done. The wrench fit perfectly. There was plenty of space inside, and you could hide all kinds of things there. The guy opened the door and started to climb inside. There was a lot of jewelry and money there. It was all his. He had accumulated it in his past life. He could finally use them after they had been lying around for 300 years. The entire storage was filled with money and weapons. There were also various precious things and objects. He stood there and thought about how hard he had managed to make these savings. Now that he can finally stop worrying about money, you can start looking for the right things. While he was looking through the coins, he noticed something. Among the pile of coins were accumulating stones. He poured a lot of magic into his recordings to preserve them, but now it's time to use them. He took one of the stones in his hand, and it immediately activated. It took him no effort at all to do so. It was expected he accumulated stones. They were overwhelmed with magical power. He could control their power, but their power was too great. First, he needs to deal with the remaining stones. Should he leave the gold bars here and take the jewelry that weighed less? Every school day was a challenge for Kim. And this time, he had additional problems in the form of crepitus. If he really thought he could pull off something like this in the future, he is just a rare idiot. Kim could not feel his body after a few swings of the shovel. What kind of hunter is this who can't even hold a shovel in his hands? While he was collecting his thoughts, Erin approached him. She started asking me to teach her the art of swordplay. He could no longer understand whether it was stubbornness or a desire to learn. According to the information he found when he was reborn, Chojin's family is a professional fencer. But why does it need him? He decided to ask her why she was asking him to do this so insistently. After all, her family could teach her as well as he could. But she wanted to learn from him because Erin had never seen anyone better with a sword than him. But what about her father, the head of the family? He was a master of this business. Why did she write him off? He should be much better than a beginner student. She didn't have time to say anything about her father, because Kim called Lee-gun into the teacher's lounge. He asked why he had to go to the teacher's lounge. They could have talked here or in the corridor. This was in reference to his past request and reward for destroying all the monsters. If he wasn't interested, then Lee-gun could just leave. But the boy abruptly stood up and approached the teacher. He wasn't worried about the fact that they hadn't finished talking to Erin. But the girl wanted to get an answer to her request, even though she expected to be rejected again. Kim decided not to respond to her questions and requests at all, but then she heard that he told her to be ready at 6 a.m. and go to the training ground, which is located on the territory of the academy. She did not expect to receive such a response that she could not even speak. Kim stopped, turned to her, and asked her why she was silent. She still couldn't speak, but she suddenly started waving her head in different directions. Then she added that she would definitely be on time. Meanwhile, Lee-gun and Kim went into the teacher's lounge. The instructor said that he was about to start his lesson, so he would try to be brief. First, he talked to the director and was allowed to visit the constellation room. He needs to go down to the basement, because except for the first, the rest of the levels will be closed to him. Kim understood and asked the instructor when he could go down there. If he is satisfied, he can leave tonight. Lee-gun was surprised because he expected the boy to make a scandal over the ban on the second and subsequent floors. But he didn't say a word about it. Lee-gun allowed him to leave. The boy returned without any complaints and went to his classroom for lessons. In the evening after school, they came to the place Kim wanted so badly. He came with a Lee-gun instructor. It was the treasure of the Valhalla Academy, Constellation Room. The guy immediately examined the entire building and its nuances. He saw 2 heavily armed guards at the entrance. Then he looked in the other direction and started looking at other places. On the other side, there were also 2 guards wearing body armor and carrying firearms. The security here was much more serious than at the main gate. This is logical, because this is the room of the constellation. Its incomparable value allows Valhalla to be one of the 3 most powerful academies. It was not only the guards outside the room that attracted his attention, but also the walls outside. Everything was wrapped in a great concentration of magic. The only place that was free of magical shackles was the main entrance. The boy asked the teacher to answer one of his questions. How can he get to the 2nd floor? And if he gets there, will he become a criminal and an enemy of the academy? He will not become a criminal, but the issue of his expulsion will be resolved instantly. In addition, He will say goodbye to his mind before he leaves school. On the second floor, the unrealistic magical power of the constellation is raging. If he touches it, his mind will not be able to withstand such an outburst. So if he got to the other floor, he would be expelled from the academy and lose his mind. But why did this little shit decide to ask this question before entering the room? Is he really planning to go down there? Ligun was sure he wasn't that stupid. The first candidate to visit the room wouldn't have done something stupid like that. He was sure the guy was aware of the seriousness of this ban. The instructor said he had 30 minutes, and then he had to leave. The guards let him in, and he said he would be back soon. He needed to get his weapons and memories back at the 3RD level of Valhalla. He didn't care about the bans, because he came to Valhalla for this. First, he needs to go to the 3rd floor. There were a lot of stairs in this building. They seemed to never end. The guy confidently walked down these stairs. And when he reached the first crossing, he saw something strange in front of him. There were a lot of cells, like in a prison, and on top there was something like a portal. He was sure that the constellation room was on the ground floor, but he was not sure if it was. In any case, it wasn't that important. So Kim wondered if he needed to go in there. The system appeared in front of him and informed him that all the conditions were met, and he was being transferred to the room. But he was not going to go in. He was sent to the room automatically. He began to disappear into space like a hallucination. Kim opened his eyes and immediately heard a familiar voice nearby. Was it really Barch? Safe and sound? The guy was confused because he did not expect to meet his old friends there. It was as if Barch had been expecting Kim to come. He was pleasantly surprised that they reunited after 300 years. But Kim did not let him continue his monologue and punched him in the face. It was a very strong and accurate blow that he could not stay on his feet. Kim was very angry and said that he was very happy to see Barch again. He tried to stop Kim and asked her to listen to him. But the guy only wanted him to die and beat him again on emotion. Barch kept hoping to calm him down and talk to him. But it seemed unrealistic. Kim continued to attack him. Kim said if he asked him to calm down, he would beat him even harder than that. His nerves were breaking down and his brain was not yet realizing how they could meet again. Barch said he was not someone who solved problems with his fists. Kim attacked him again and said that it would be a grave mistake not to use the opportunity to smash his stupid head in. Because he had ruined his happy future, his wealth, his reputation. He spent so much time teaching his students. Barch asked the guy if he wasn't curious about the place. But he already realized that it was an imaginary world. There was nothing there but them. To be more precise, it is a subspace of relics. And the Barch he saw now was just a reincarnation in the world of space. His real body disappeared 300 years ago. That is, according to him, he has always been in this relic. Kim began to think about what this could mean for him. Barch began to smile, because there was only one logical explanation for this. He reincarnated and became a constellation in the future. In front of Kim, he looked like a little child begging to be picked up. Kim didn't take this information well and hit Barch again. Security was tightened while Kim was inside. Ligun was waiting for the guy to return and hoped that everything would go well, and he will not have to look for any explanations to the director of the academy. And then Kim came out, looking as if nothing had happened to him at all. The guards checked him with a detector. Ligun asked him if he had done anything strange there, but the guy replied that he had just looked around. He could not go down any further because he might lose his mind. The instructor listened to him and asked him to go to his dormitory, if everything was fine. Kim understood everything, said goodbye to the teacher, and went into the room. As he walked back, he was haunted by thoughts of the constellation room, and he thought about everything Barch had told him about the place. He didn't care that he had become a constellation. He wanted to hear what interested him. The guy asked if he had created the window for messages, and if so, what it was for. but Barch looked like he was hearing about it for the first time and said he didn't know anything about it. Kim grabbed him by the collar and threatened to continue beating him if he didn't confess. After Kim killed him, he stayed there for 300 years, completely powerless. He listened to him, and it sounded convincing enough. So he let the guy go. Then he was left with the question of who was sending him these messages. Barch said he had also received similar messages. He received a message that he needed to meet the reborn Kim and get his memories back. For this reason, one very suspicious person appeared. I wonder if this was all done by the person who made him the boss of the Tower of Destruction. If this was done by the person who appointed Barch as the boss of the Tower of Destruction, then he needed to know who he was. But he couldn't say that because all the memories associated with him had been lost. He wasn't sure that his memories could come back very quickly. Barch asked Kim what was written in his message. He said that he was asked to find his lost weapons and memories. There was also some kind of inscription on the bottom that was hard to read. It seemed to him that he had regained all his memories, because he remembered perfectly what was happening in the tower. Barch said that perhaps this is not all he needs to remember. He has already found his weapon, so the memories should come back naturally. But the guy didn't understand anything, because he didn't find the weapon. This subspace was the inner world of 4 types of village swords that became sacred relics. It was because he used one of them as a relic that it became a constellation. Kim really didn't like it when he started bragging about becoming a constellation, because it made absolutely no sense, because he was there alone in infinite space. He continued to walk to his dormitory while analyzing the information. His village sword turned into a relic with a constellation inside. It was something fantastic and illogical. He wanted to destroy it and throw it out of his memory. But now it appeared in his hands, just after thinking about it. It didn't matter how weak he was now. Surely Barch, who used to be called the king of the Tower of Destruction, he couldn't leave without the necessary supervision. He could only fulfill a new quest that could only be achieved with this sword. Kim heard a voice behind him, asking if he was the same newcomer who had won first place in the entrance exams. This boy said that his elders were away, so now he needed to introduce himself to them. He was a second-year student, the eldest son of the Sunrays family, Lyric. Kim said that he didn't think that bullies like him also had younger ones. Even if he won first place among the newcomers, it's not enough to talk to the elders like that. One of the hooligans asked for permission to teach the newcomer a lesson so that he would not want to be so rude to his elders in the future. He stepped forward and pulled out his broom. It was not clear what kind of weapon it was. Before he could even finish his sentence, he received a powerful kick to the chest. The guy asked him to shut up and attack normally. The bully did not expect this from the newcomer to their academy. He thought that he was just another amateur whom they would beat up and raise their authority. But Kim beat him with all his heart. The guy just couldn't counter his attacks. After another blow, he simply flew into the crowd of his comrades. They failed to catch him because the speed was too high, and it happened very suddenly. So he flew as far as the nearest fence and crashed into it. Lyric was very angry because it would hit their reputation very hard. He mentioned that he was asked to do it by Rockdale. He promised to help in any situation if they taught this first grader a lesson. The guy claimed that he had just entered the academy and was a beginner and a failure. He even allowed me to use the weapon and said he would clean up the mess afterwards. His task was to destroy Kim by any means necessary. He agreed, and they shook hands. Lyric was sure that this was just another task they needed to complete. It doesn't matter what place he occupied among the first graders. A beginner is still a beginner. He won't be able to cope with the elders. In one way or another, newcomers are very different from the older ones, primarily because of the contract with the constellation. In the second semester of their first year, Valhalla students must visit a constellation room and sign a contract with one of them. Students who have signed contracts are called contractors and are eligible to move on to the second year of their studies. A person who becomes a contractor also gets the right to use the power of his or her constellation. Kim did not belong to any of the families and does not have this advantage. It will be very easy to deal with him. You will have to solve this issue yourself. He thought so until his friend was knocked out. He used his sword to defend and attack. But it was so easy for him that he didn't even take it out of the case. One fat hooligan pulled out a knife and started to approach the boy. But before he could even blink, he was hit with a sword handle. His fat body fell to the ground very quickly from this blow. Kim was attacked by several people at the same time. As soon as he knocked out the red-headed fat man, the next one jumped on him. He grabbed a stick and wanted to strike with it. Concentrating his energy in it, he attacked the guy with all his might. But his shot hit the ground completely. Kim dodged without any problems, and the guy couldn't believe it. But he realized that he might already be behind him. And so it was. The guy was standing behind me unharmed. He was hit in the face with his own stick. Lyric was forced to watch Kim throw his jar all over the street, because no one can give him even minimal competition. He began to panic and did not know what to do next. It was something incredible. He destroyed the sophomores one by one. Before becoming a contractor, sophomores must prove their superiority over beginners in martial arts. But now the opposite is happening. Almost all the seniors have been knocked out by the newcomer. Why were they so helpless in the battle against him? And he also had a very strange fencing skill. From the outside, it didn't seem like he was making much effort, but the people around him were flying away one by one. Kim noticed that a few of the hooligans were behaving very strangely. They were ganging up on each other and just wanted to defend themselves. But Kim told them that he would rip off their heads if they did not attack him. Everyone started thinking about what they could do to avoid being attacked. Lyric started yelling at them and said they were losers if they couldn't deal with a newbie. Kim admired the motivational speech of their idiot leader. But when he heard these insults, he immediately grabbed his weapon and rushed into the fight. But he did not understand why his body could not move forward. Kim was stopping him with his sword. It looked very funny compared to the evil hooligans they were fighting 10 minutes ago. The guy asked how long he was going to stand in one place. Then he transferred some of his energy into the weapon and endowed it with magic. Thanks to this, I was able to attack him in close combat. Lyric didn't even realize when he had gotten so close. As a result, he lost consciousness from such a powerful attack. Such a blow could have knocked down at least 3 men. The rest of his gang ran away. Kim went to him and started to wake him up. He slapped him in the face to make him come to his senses. The guy asked who he was and why he came and attacked him. Lyric minimally rose and said that they were studying 1 grade higher. But Kim didn't understand how this was related to the fact that they came and attacked the younger one. Was it really their gang order? He asked to know who sent him. The guy said that they were just trying to humiliate the newcomer who took first place. Kim knew perfectly well that he was lying, so he asked him not to tell him a fairy tale and to confess. Since he wasn't going to tell the truth, Kim decided not to waste time and was about to leave. Lyric told him not to hope that he could continue to attend the academy, as if nothing had happened. No matter what place he held among the newcomers, if people found out about his actions, he would be expelled quickly. Kim did not care at all. He advised me to take care of my own well-being. A few sophomores decided to beat up a freshman, and the latter took them down. If people find out, it will be them who will be ashamed to attend the academy, not him. Kim asked me to think about it if he didn't want to disturb his study idyll. These were the last words of the guy. After that, he went home while everyone was lying on the sidewalk. Rockdill was looking forward to hearing from his mercenary Lyric. He could call at any time, so he decided not to hide the phone at all. And so he finally waited. Rockdale picked up the phone and asked how Kim was doing. With each word in response, his smile began to fade. Lyric said that this job was not for him, and he refused it. She abruptly holstered her sword again. Then she tried to remember all the techniques she possesses and use them in symbiosis. Now she had one more advantage, apart from having a sword. She could enhance her attacks with magic. The girl felt that her legs accelerated and her body became sharper and more powerful. She liked it very much and actively began to attack Kim. He also noticed that Aaron had become much faster, but there was one caveat. There was no need to put more energy into your legs than they needed. She needs to learn to manage this energy that has appeared in her. She again prepared for the attack and returned to her original position. Aaron considered her mistakes and listened to the boy. After that, she rushed to attack him again. She reduced the concentration of energy in her legs and tried to transfer it to the strike. Kim noted that this shot was really good and much more technical than the previous one. But when she stopped, her body relaxed and was not ready to attack in return. She needs to try to turn her body better. Another mistake was highlighted by Kim, and if she corrects it, it will be strongly reflected in the attacks. The guy asked to correct mistakes and attack immediately in order to work it out in practice. Although she had already dealt enough blows, her stamina was on a completely different level compared to the past. The girl made attack after attack, and she liked it. Each time she corrected one of her mistakes. And thanks to this, she could become stronger literally every minute. Since she worked out these mistakes in practice, it was easy for her to remember. The body gained experience and produced reflexes. Aaron could destroy floors and walls with her punches. Kim continued to load her with work so that her brain would not have time to be distracted by other stimuli. With each stroke, her confidence improved, as did her technique. If you compare her on the first day of selection and now, they were completely different people. Thanks to Kim's training, she has become much more powerful. Although the boy was able to fend off her punches very easily, he felt that she had greatly improved her skills and improved on what was lagging behind. They continued to train. Aaron and Kim both enjoyed it and didn't want to stop. After they started training, the sun was already starting to set. The entire training hall was in ruins, but Aaron was very persistent. And she continued training, although her body could hardly stand on her feet. More than an hour had already passed, and Kim offered to end the training. As soon as the girl heard this, she immediately fell to the floor without strength. Kim wasn't even tired, although he noticed that Aaron's level had increased significantly. She believed that her current skill had been practiced much better than at any other time. The skills she possessed at the time of entry could not even be compared. But she was troubled by one more question that troubled her. Although she had increased her level several times, she still couldn't even come close to Kim's level. Of course, that's why she asked him to teach her fencing, because she saw his strength and technique. Aaron knew that if she competed with him at every training session, she would be able to progress even better. Therefore, she asked to add sparring to training next time. He thought about it and said he needed to think about it. He could benefit from communication with Aaron. And since she had talent, it was quite interesting and fun to teach her. Even during the exam, he noticed that she was familiar with some of the practices he knew. She also uses breathing techniques, but does it somehow differently? In any case, he would be able to regain his senses through familiar techniques. If she had asked to train her 300 years ago, he would have rewarded her with the opportunity to become his apprentice. But now was a completely different time. Aaron was a very persistent girl, so she asked again if they could compete next time. He decided to make a joke and said that he didn't want to. Aaron did not ask this question again, and the boy was surprised that she gave up so quickly. But she replied that she agreed with him because he was right. If she follows his advice, she will surely become even stronger. It was something new for him. They had finished training today. 2 weeks later, the Valhalla Stadium was full of students. Each of them dreamed of continuing their studies at this academy. But only the best will remain. It was Soan's first time at the stadium since the opening ceremony. All the students of the school were gathered there. Sahik didn't think there would be so many rides. As always, Aaron was emotionless and just waiting for everything to start. Kim did not understand at all why they were all gathered in this stadium. Barch said. His homeroom teacher had been telling all the students about it as recently as 2 weeks ago. All the teachers gathered there, and Lemore was ready to tell about the procedure for holding intermediate exams. This time, the exam task will be an attack in the dungeon. They will have to unite in teams and go to an artificially created dungeon. The stadium began to disappear, and the appearance of a real dungeon was recreated around. Real entrances to dungeons were recreated for them, for each team separately. They could combine as they wished. The maximum number per team is 8 people, but each group can collect the composition individually. Marks will be awarded only based on their merit in this test. There will also be disqualification criteria in this competition. If they are unable to complete the task within the specified time, it will be completed automatically for them. They and the board of teachers chose the difficulty of the dungeon. It will be an F level. Now it's time to check what they have learned during this period at the academy. Time passed and they needed to divide into teams first. They negotiated with each other and tried to form optimal teams. The teachers watched this. As expected, they were filled with emotions. They were interested in how the leaders of their school would show themselves. Soan led the team. Their binder wasn't strong enough. They needed to get another one. But she understood that she did not need to choose those who were stronger than her. For 8 people in the dungeon, 5 hours would be enough. It is much more important what contribution she will manage to make during this time. Among the 6 willing people, it was realistic to choose those who have good enough skills. In theory, everything was very easy, but it is also worth considering the issue of teamwork. Lemore expected that the child of the 5th generation was perfectly aware of the meaning of the exam task. But the rest of the students gathered in groups of 20 people, or they usually enter the dungeon in a group of 8 people. If the team is poorly balanced, then fights appear in it. In about half an hour, all students will enter the dungeon. Teachers need to prepare for their assessment. Meanwhile, Kim stood alone and was in no rush to join anyone. He wondered if anyone had completed the exam immediately with a passing grade. He was flying in his thoughts as always. Kim turned his head and saw Erin standing next to him. He decided to approach her and ask if she had not found a team yet. The girl answered that she had not. But everyone had already gone to the dungeons, which she expected. The girl decided to do as he told her. Kim had no idea what she meant. Something strange has been happening to her lately. She is like a parrot repeating everything from the last training session. The guy said he would go himself and advised her to do the same. But she was not sure that she was ready to go alone. Kim thought that there would be nothing difficult. He turned and walked towards the nearest door leading to the dungeon. The girl stood and couldn't decide how to act in this situation. Would she be able to cope on her own because her strength was much less than Kim's? The guys from the other team noticed that Erin was left alone. One of them ran up to her and asked if her name was Erin. If she didn't have a team, he offered to join them. They were just 1 person short. The girl listened to him, but said that she was going to go to the dungeons herself. The guy asked not to do this, because she will be disqualified. Kim told her that it wasn't as hard as it looked, so she could handle it. The boys tried to stop her, but there was no point in it. Once she had made up her mind, no one could influence her. All students have already formed teams and gone to the dungeon. The teachers carefully observed the actions of each of the participants. Ligon had to watch his students, like every classroom teacher. Every student looked very scared. They saw monsters for the first time in their life. They managed to earn only a few points in a long period of time. In practice, everything seemed much more difficult than in the manuals. Each of them had their own dungeon performance statistics filled out by teachers. All students were shown on separate screens. Teachers must manage to distribute points between them for each activity. Many people may think that their quick score is very rough, but their scores are actually very fast and clear. No mistakes. Lemur was called the master of precision ever since he was a common soldier. He was truly a legendary contractor who had a 99 dungeon clearing rate. There is absolutely no need to doubt the professionalism of his evaluation. Thanks to all his regalia, he has the full right to issue any evaluations. He very carefully watched the actions of each student in the dungeon, and it could not necessarily be during the battle itself. All in all, Lemur felt that this year had given them enough good students. And the descendants of the 5th generation were also quite active. But one student stood out among them all. It was one of the daughters of prominent families, Soen. She very competently assembled the team and clearly led them during the battle. When the goblins attacked her team, due to proper positioning and management, they managed to destroy the enemy. She placed shield guards at the beginning for good protection and cover for archers and mages. Her leadership skills were at a higher level than her fighting skills. Everyone respected and trusted her, because she showed results. The girl pretended not to hear, and the boy said goodbye to her. She went to the door and said goodbye to Kim as well. As she headed home, Kim put on more weight to do a few sets. Brock asked what this girl's name was. Kim answered Erin. He saw that she did every workout and had no regrets at all. But why did he decide to teach her? The boy replied that she had asked for it very insistently. Brock asked if he ever showed Erin his swordsmanship skills. He didn't specifically show her, but he's sure she saw them in class like everyone else. Interestingly, she only wanted to learn from him after seeing his technique. It was really interesting, so he wanted to teach her a few practices. While Kim was chatting with Barch, someone came into the gym. It was Sihik. He spent all his free time here. This was his problem. If he had paid attention to other aspects, he could have progressed much faster. And now he, as before, only physical strength, but his other characteristics are very weak. He also noticed Kim working out next to him. They stared at each other for a long time until Kim started talking. He asked how long Sek has been here. He answered that he is almost always here. Before entering the academy, he was involved in sports all his life. Their conversation did not last long, because Sehek was clearly watching the time before the approaches. Perhaps this is the merit of physiology, but he is inclined to the fact that he is able to withstand such prolonged physical exertion thanks to his talent. Brock asked what was going on and why he was interested in this man. He was definitely smarter than those who are only busy developing their magical power. What do these scum of the constellation do anyway? He wanted to know this information from Brock, but he didn't know anything about it. Despite the fact that he was also a constellation, he had to remain isolated from the outside world for the last 300 years. He knew nothing about other constellations. He was sure that Kim would get more information. The code will complete his main quest. In order to complete the main task, he needs to complete an additional one. Find the Eye of Valhalla of the Great Forest. He heard about it. In the first semester, they visited this place. If it weren't for this cursed quest, he would have taken his things from there a long time ago. But it seems that now he will have to act covertly. But what did secret mean to him, since he recently started a fight with those bullies? Kim said that those idiots didn't look like they were going to hug him, especially since he was already holding back for a very long time. If he didn't, his head would explode. In any case, until he completes this quest, he will not be able to leave. He hoped that it would reveal some of the mysteries about reincarnation. We are shown a large mansion in London of the Ventrique family. It was all decorated with precious statues and objects. On the walls, everything was in the style of a black crow. Paintings and sculptures. The deputy head received the intelligence assistant in the conference room. She called him to find out how far their case had progressed. and she also asked to tell what happened in general. He said they had figured out the outskirts of Reading's maze. Adelia asked if he had any information he wanted to tell her. He wanted to recruit some competent people he met on the way home. This time, only one person from the impoverished Robert clan survived in the maze. He was strong enough. The two people he met were rank contractors. People like this deserve the opportunity to be honored by the Ventrik family. Adelia asked to evaluate their potential and then send them to her. The assistant had all the news for the time being. But there was one piece of news that she wasn't going to like very much. It was about Rockdale. Adelia tensed and asked what he had done. He heard that the guy personally invited Disser to Korea. The woman's face showed that she did not like this decision and had problems with it before. Disser was a very troubled child and lawbreaker. Under the guise of the Ventrik family, he did many terrible things. At the age of 19, in an English academy, he killed 5 people who tried to argue with him. For this reason, at the age of 20, he was expelled from his family. He became an exile and hid for many years. She asked that scouts be attached to him on behalf of Rockdale. She also asked to inform Rockdale about it. And if he is caught doing something strange, he will be kicked out of the family just like Disera. The assistant understood everything and concluded his report on this. Adelia should have thought about these 2 stupid boys. They could cause trouble and tarnish their family's reputation. These scumbags wield power that was earned only by birth. Idiots are not allowed to wield that kind of influence. This power must be earned and be able to use it wisely. Their principle is all for the sake of one. Everything belongs to only one. After all, everything belonged to her, the rightful owner and descendant. She got this power for a reason. She was given it by the keeper of the constellation himself. She got a very important role in this game. If you analyze the word thief, you can guess that it consists of 2 words. Evil and actions, literally describing the negative side of a person. In modern society, this definition is used to characterize those people who use the power of their constellations. And although they often act alone, there is a place for such individuals in their world. Among these organizations, the group of monotheists is considered the most famous. Kim could feel himself getting stronger because of his training. He could also feel his potential to develop mana concentration. It's hard to call yourself a genius, but it brings him closer to the level he possessed before the reincarnation. But he was still weak. Despite how unprepared this body was to begin with. Why was it so weak? When he practiced the circulations on the first day, he was barely able to complete them, as he possessed even less mana than an ordinary person. His physical condition turned out to be so terrible that he tired after 2 swings of the shovel. But even all these open questions will not prevent him from finishing what he started. It seemed to him that something had happened to this body in the past. For sure, he could not find out in any way. Although, what is the point of bothering about it now? At one of the classes, while the boy was flying in his thoughts, Soen put something on his table. At first, he did not understand what she wanted to do, but then he saw a piece of paper on the desk, which the girl took out. He began to wonder what this meant because he was used to always looking for a logical chain. No thoughts entered his head, and he decided to simply take and read the note. There was simply written one word, "Hey." Everything looked very strange. It was Friday, which meant that the students had a weekend ahead. They will be allowed to leave the building this weekend. Students who plan to leave need to write a statement in advance. The lesson was over. Lee Gun said goodbye to the students and wished them a good weekend. It was good information for him to leave the building. He wrote this statement and was about to go out into the outside world. He needs to go to one place. Brack tried to find out what kind of place it was, but Kim refused to answer and remained silent. He was about to file his application in the teacher's office when he saw someone approaching from behind. It was Soen who was about to go home. The boy decided to inquire what new kind of pranks it was. He even kindly replied to her note, which in return she decided not to do. He demanded a quick answer from her because he was in a hurry to submit a statement. She tried to find the words to say something, but it looked like she was speechless. It drove Kim crazy, and he hated to put up with it. He asked her to give birth to at least one sentence, because she looked like she was not normal. Soen asked why he called her abnormal. He replied that she angered him with her terrible diction. He tried once more to find out what she wanted to tell him. She immediately remembered the day when their test results were announced, and then Lilia made him do her tasks to prove her point. And her question sounded as follows. How did he manage to kill a stone goblin with a blunt sword and without magic at all? Because in the books that are given to them in the academy, completely different information is written. She just wanted to ask how he managed to deal with that stone goblin. She felt as if she had trampled her pride into the ground, while Soen tried to squeeze out at least one word. Lilia jumped out in front of her and asked to tell her how he managed to kill the goblin with a dull sword without magic. She expected to hear a clear answer that would suit her. The boy still couldn't calm down because she scared him very much with her appearance. He asked why she interfered in their conversation, and in general, he thought that she did not like him. It was expected enough, because from the moment he literally threw his unusual answers in her face, she hates him for humiliating her in front of everyone. Lilia replied that she didn't care. Before that, she thought there was only one way to kill monsters until he showed her a completely different one. She put her hand on his shoulder as if they were best friends. The teacher offered him to become her assistant, but he refused because he had to submit his application for departure, which starts today. She attached herself to him and began to persuade him to become her assistant. She offered to write a joint work about monsters that would be shown to the whole world. Because of her shyness, the girl was never able to find out the answer to her question. She reassured herself that it wasn't important enough to be upset about. But in reality, she really wanted to talk to such a strong student. The day after Kim wrote the statement to leave, he was already in town. The last time he was in this place was before he came to the academy selection. The day before at the Valhalla dormitory, Kim had been awake for a long time. He sat in front of the computer all the time and looked for something on the phone. Barch asked what he was trying to find. The boy replied that he was looking for information about where he was going tomorrow. He needs to find a forum where he can sell all the treasures found in his vault. And it seems he found it. This place was called the Market. From what he learned about it, after paying an entry fee, it allows people to freely trade their favorite values and even assets. Although it can be used by anyone, it is still considered a black market because of the number of thieves and scammers. The reason why the existence of such a market is possible is its owner, who is called the Hidden Owner and is one of the few guardian constellations. For this reason, the market is often used by high-ranking officials and people respected in narrow circles. Even if it is illegal, the authorities are in no hurry to cut down such trade. Finding a way to get there should not cause problems. He decided to use one of the sites on which he should be given a link. Aaron texted him and said that he won't be able to come to tomorrow's training because they have to go. The guy also said that he is going somewhere, so there will definitely be no training tomorrow. The girl sat with a repentant face in front of the phone, but the emoticons she sent were very emotional. He just wanted to wish her a nice trip and she kept sending emojis. In any case, the post said that if he followed the link in the comments, he would be able to book a place and get the coordinates. He started monitoring all the comments and seemed to find what he needed. The next day, he collected himself and, as always, took a knapsack with him and set off on his way. He followed the map to where he was told in the link, as if there was nothing difficult to find this place. This market must be somewhere near the old cafe. Kim decided to raise his head and saw that this cafe was right in front of his eyes. But it cannot be called old because it was simply destroyed and abandoned. The windows are broken, everything inside is broken, and there are a lot of cobwebs. He hid his phone and went inside, because the entrance was somewhere around here. He needed to enter this room and head to the right corner. He turned his head to the right and saw a lonely door there. This is probably what he needs. He walked over to the door and grabbed the handle to open it. When he came out, everything around him was in different colors, and he seemed to have entered another world. It was like a separate city within the city. Everyone was engaged in his work. But you have to be very careful there, because he was aware of swindlers and thieves. Kim began to look around to roughly understand where he should go next, because the coordinator brought him only to this place, and then he needs to move on his own. He was still standing by the door, and he had a strange feeling about this place. Although he was sure that he was there for the first time, but for some reason, it seemed to him that everything was very familiar. This is especially true of the purple sky and the cloudy moon. All this strongly evokes in his memories the same landscape that he saw 300 years ago. While he was figuring out where to go next, a man approached him and asked if he was here for the first time. He was a fairly tall man who was well-groomed and dressed. This is probably the employee who was written about on the website via the link. Kim replied that he was here for the first time. The man asked if he knew how to use the market. The guy said that it was just a little and took out a wad of money from his satchel. He gave them to this man because those were the rules of the place. He had to give him almost the entire prize money from the first place at the admissions. Only 30,000 remained in his pocket. But he came here to earn money, so it's not scary. The man asked to ask him any questions about this place. Kim said that there is one question. He wanted to sell his valuables and did not know where he should go. The man asked if he wanted to put them up for auction, but Kim said he just wanted to sell them quickly. In this case, he needs to go to the market in the 3rd district. There are a bunch of merchants who buy everything from gems to ammo, as well as many other things that you can think of. He asked who among them could be called the most reliable person. If among his goods are gold and precious stones, he would recommend Morris, who has the best prices. The 3rd district was straight, and at the first intersection, straight again. The boy wanted to leave, but the man advised him to use a mask here. He took out a black mask of one of the animals for him, due to the nature of the goods traded in the market. For the most part, everyone wears masks. He asked it to be considered his gift for the boy. Kim put on this mask and thanked the consultant. The man wished good trade and said goodbye. The boy turned and left. And here he was in the 3rd district after a few minutes. Everyone there was wearing masks, just like this man said. People were selling gold and diamonds. The guy approached one of the merchants and asked if his name was Morris. He replied that it was true, and asked how he could help such a young man. Kim said he has a few things he wants to sell right now. It all depended on the goods themselves. If there is gold or precious stones among them, he can check them quickly enough. The boy took off his knapsack and started to get his things. First, he pulled out a small black pouch. Then he threw it on the table and said he wanted to sell it all. The merchant took this bag and began to look at the things. They were rings. He took out one first and began to check its quality. After a few seconds, he jumped in surprise. This ring was an artifact of the Age of Destruction, as possible. He examined it several times from all sides, and it was definitely an artifact of the Age of Destruction. Then he decided to pay attention to the rest of the rings. They were also from this era. There were a lot of them, and they were saturated with powerful energy. All these gems belonged to the same period. He began to wonder where this boy got such valuable things. Kim asked how much he could offer for all these items. He pretended to be thinking and did not pretend that these were very valuable rings. He was no more than 20 years old, but the question of where he found them did not leave him. Morris decided not to invent anything and asked directly where he got these artifacts. He heard that such questions are never asked here. The man apologized and said that he was absolutely right. These artifacts were so confusing to him that he completely forgot about the rules of the market. He almost tarnished his reputation as a trader. After another examination of these rings, he said that he did not know how much to value them. Because they were artifacts from the Age of Destruction, he didn't have enough money to buy them back in full. Then he asked where he should go to get the money for them. When he was walking to this area, he passed a tall building. There was an auction hall. He asked how long they could be sold after he put them up for auction. On average, it is about 2-3 weeks. Since many have already reserved seats, some time must pass before he can sell them. Kim asked if he would have to come to the market in person if he put them up for sale. Morris said yes if he had to go through an inspection to get paid. The guy was upset because it was so problematic and long. Although he said that he could not value them, at least let him say how much this thing is approximately valued at the auction. He took out his phone and started surfing their auction site. Then he took the average price and was ready to show the price. Kim was simply petrified when he saw such a number. He couldn't even count how many zeros there were. Although even in his past life, they were not cheap. It was a good idea to hide them away from prying eyes. The guy asked how much money he needed to buy them back. Morris replied that this is only his subjective assessment, because when they get to the auction, there will be a completely different story. If he sold everything he owns, he would only be able to pay for 80 of the total price of these precious things. The guy thought for a few minutes and formed an offer for the merchant. He was ready to sell him these things for 80 of the total market value. Morris did not expect such generosity from a 20-year-old boy. Artifacts from the Age of Destruction sell for so much, not only because they belong to a certain period of time, but for one more reason, thanks to the constellations. The constellations that began to appear during the end of this era, for some inexplicable reason, blended in very nicely with the artifacts of that time. Because even an ordinary person who does not possess any power can only use them to make a contract with an S-rank constellation. If he remembered correctly, it was called the Alchemist Zone. If Morris was not mistaken, he was still a contractor. These rings had a lot of power and carried great possibilities. Watching the mana circulate inside, he was completely convinced that they belonged to the Age of Destruction. The magic released before the end of the Era of Destruction still remained inside. An artifact of this era must possess certain characteristics. 8 artifacts from the Age of Destruction. Who would have believed that he would be able to buy them back so cheaply? After another close inspection, he began to bag them. It was definitely his lucky day, and a good opportunity to earn in the future. While he was thinking about where he would spend his money earned from these artifacts, a client approached him. But it seems that Morris was not too happy about his visit. It was a very tall man in a cat mask, and he was very serious. This market entrance door was really inconspicuous, and no one would even guess about this place. Kim managed to sell his things, and now he could safely return to the hostel. He took off his mask. It was so uncomfortable and difficult to breathe that he almost died. If he exits through the same door he entered, he must return to his original location. It must be the same cafe. Thanks to this campaign, his money issue was closed. Who would have thought that he would be able to earn such money for only 8 rings? Even if he spends the entire amount, he still has a full storage with various valuable items. From now on, he should not have any problems with finances. While the boy was enjoying his position, he received a phone call. It was some unknown number, and it is strange that they called as soon as it left the market. The guy first analyzed who it could be, and then picked up the phone. It was his teacher, Lilia. She invited him to have lunch together. He asked where she found his number. She replied that her position allowed it to be done without problems. The teacher continued to persuade him. She invited him to the gym and promised to treat him to lunch. Immediately after that, she hung up. Who does that anyway? He considered the idea of eating at her expense and playing along with her, especially if he was free now. He was the master of the entire market and every trading place on this street. Morris was concerned and asked why he had come here. The owner asked if they were on such bad terms that he did not want to communicate with him. But they met only a few times and didn't even talk then. An ordinary trader can't just chat with the owner of the market so easily. He owned it a long time ago, and his last name was a black cat. He said that it was because of his manner of communication that he really liked him. Morris decided not to detain the host and asked what he was here for. There was nothing serious. It seems that he submitted an anonymous application for participation in the auction for the first time. He admitted that this application was not as anonymous as he would have liked, since the real owner of this market is not him, in his constellation. He could collect any information. In any case, he wanted to look at the goods he had put up for auction. Although they belonged to the era of destruction, the black cat decided to personally show interest in the artifacts for the first time. He reached under the table and pulled out a small black pouch. The black cat took out the rings and began to look at them. He assumed that they could be sold at a fairly high price. His constellation really liked one ring and wanted to get what it wanted. Kim still came to meet Lilia at the Valhalla restaurant. They ordered quite a lot of food, including spaghetti and pizza and salads. Lilia started eating tzatziki because it is her favorite food since childhood. Moreover, she only ate once a day, so her taste buds were very sensitive. While she was eating, Kim kept looking around and seemed to be expecting someone. Lilia noticed this and asked why he did not eat with her. He wondered why Valhalla even had such a place. In addition to the school canteen and staff cafe, there were also regular restaurants like this one. He started eating and said he didn't care if there were restaurants here or not. They had their fill and Kim asked why she called him here. The teacher formulated a thought in her head for several minutes. And then she offered him to become her assistant, but the guy immediately refused. She demanded that he think about her offer before refusing. Being her assistant is very beneficial because he gets a lot of advantages over the other students at once. He knew perfectly well what she wanted to talk about when he came here. So Lilia asked him to listen to her until the end. The guy agreed so that she wouldn't make him pay the bill, and asked what privileges he would have. First, he will receive a scholarship and a large amount of grants. He will also have the opportunity to write a dissertation together with Neb. He will need to publish in the dissertation those features of monsters that have not yet been discovered. Then his name will be entered in the list of the World Association for the Study of Monsters. It is clear that this will ensure him great fame and wealth. He will be allowed to leave the academy twice a week instead of once a month. He asked if there was anything else of interest to him. He would also be able to work with Lilia. But that sounded very dubious for the privilege. She began to get angry and asked not to be fussy, but to finally become her assistant. Kim said he didn't want to. If there were some attractive advantages, he would have thought about it. But she didn't say anything interesting. His main task at the moment is to get to the eye of the big forest. You can get there only during the certification, so even with its help, you won't be able to reduce the time. He was not going to become her assistant and write a thesis together. Then she decided to offer something else. Exchange information. If she could share with him information that would be of interest to him, would he then be able to tell about the characteristics of the monsters he knew? He wondered what information she wanted to share. Lilia said it was about the girl who was always around him, Aaron. But he only helped her with training. Did she think that they were so close? He said that he was not interested in it, but Lilia reported that she was going to be kicked out of the family. He listened to her last monologue and got up from the table to leave. He finished his meal and its benefits were not attractive enough for him. And now that they were finished, he had to go on business. But in this case, she demanded that the boy share at least some information. If even he was not interested in it, he learned this information. He sat down and said that he was really very interested in something. Lilia was very pushy now. But why is she so strict during training? She was an instructor who teaches children to fight unknown monsters. Therefore, she needs to present information as seriously as possible, because she talks about unpleasant things. Her stay at the academy depends on how well they master the material. Some of them may not even remember basic attacks, so you have to be strict with them. That is, it was just an ideology. Lilia said that it is the instructor's duty. The guy had fun and learned what he was really interested in. After that, he turned around and purposefully walked to the door, saying goodbye to the teacher beforehand. But she caught up with him and said that he should at least pay her for the information. Kim didn't really want that, so he refused. Meanwhile, part of the Choijin family gathered in the temple. It was the father, like the head of the family, Erin and her brother. They were sitting at the table together. He gathered them to find out their intentions before the distribution test began, as family prestige was his duty. He was the guild commander-in-chief. Sitting next to Erin was the eldest son of the Choijun family, John, and the second daughter of the Choijun family, Kim's classmate, Erin. He reached for his sword and said if they could pass the placement test, then they will have the opportunity to conclude a contract through the sacred relic. Thanks to this, the legitimacy of their family heritage will be confirmed. But it will be the opposite if they fail this exam. After that, they will be expelled from the family very quickly. Father asked if they were ready for such a task. The brother answered with great enthusiasm that he was ready. Erin also agreed, but not so emotionally because she was very withdrawn. The entire room was blinded by the energy of this sword. The father accepted their answers and expected only a positive result from them. The distribution test will take place in 3 weeks. Now they are free and can prepare now. They left their father's office together and went about their business. The brother asked Erin if she understood these hints from the head of the family. The girl didn't really know what he meant. Didn't she see the look on his face when she said she was going to take part in the placement test? The father was worried that she would encroach on his position in the family. The brother laughed and said that it seems that she really wanted to become the head of the family with such intentions. This girl suffered from childhood. She was recognized as illegitimately born. It outraged her, and she didn't even want to think about it. Her brother continued to make fun of her. He was sure that she would not be able to win the placement test. She is not even able to receive the blessing of the constellation when he has already entered into a contract with him. Erin felt broken, although she didn't show it on the outside. Her emotions were raging inside her. The brother believed that she had already lost morally. So he asked her to go and continue to spend the family funds, because she could not do anything else. He promised to take revenge for this and was already waiting for her to fail the test. The girl was broke. She would like to have a good family that will support her. When her mother was dying, she said some very important words. Erin was still small then, but she remembered everything clearly. Her mother said that she must become the head of the family. And when she achieves this goal, only then will she be free and do whatever she wants. The girl remembered these words and realized that it was time to act. The next day, everyone must return from their trips and come to the training. Kim was sitting in the classroom. The first lesson was taught by Ligun. He flew again in his thoughts and made plans for the future. Barch said he thought the exams would start soon. If Kim had sat more quietly, he would have been able to hear the teacher clearly. Because right now, he is telling how the next test will be. But usually the boy doesn't pay attention to it. Ligun said that the students should know this, but he would say it again. In Valhalla, exams are very important. Those who score the minimum number of points on the exams will be excluded from the academy. Therefore, they need to take this seriously. He hoped that everyone would prepare well for the written and practical tests so as not to fail the first exam. There were not as many practical tests as written ones. Kim has to hold on to this school until he gets to the big forest. But now he doesn't even know how to get there. He remembered that he had a Braish mini assistant, and the boy called him. He had been with him in absolutely every lesson almost since he entered here. So he said Bart should write the tests for him, and he will simply check these tests and correct them if something is wrong. But it was like cheating. He thought it was unfair. Kim would have written this test anyway with his prompts, so it's better for him to do it himself. That was the end of the lesson, and Lee Gun praised everyone. Kim packed his things and wanted to get away from this necessary place. But as always, he cannot do anything without an incident. Someone called him. It was Erin. She came up to him again with a stony face. She asked if he had any training scheduled today. Kim said yes, and asked if she was tired from classes. But the girl said that she was not tired, but simply decided to clarify. Kim said that now they need to teach her real swordsmanship. It's time to talk to her. Judging by the way she trains with him, she probably doesn't have a sword at all. It won't be straight fencing or martial arts, but he promised to teach her how to hold a sword correctly. Besides, it was also the best time for him to start training with weapons. He called her to the training room next to the hall. And so they met at the specified time at training. Everyone already had a weapon in their hands. He asked how long it had been since she had last picked up her sword. She hadn't touched him since she started strength training, and before that, she trained every day. Kim asked her to draw her sword from its sheath. She did it slowly and in no hurry. It was nervous for her because she hadn't fought in a long time. She pulled it out and stood up. The boy asked to put strength into the ring finger and little finger and squeeze the handle tighter. She started fumbling with her fingers, and it reduced her effectiveness. But after a few minutes, she figured it out and did everything as Kim asked. She was shocked when she saw the result of her hard work. The sword instantly gathered all the energy and accumulated it. She didn't even try to imbue him with magic. It felt like this kind of finger arrangement could hold the sword much better than two hands together. Now that she had it figured out, he asked her to attack him with all her might. Erin listened carefully to Kim's instructions because his training had already worked once, and she was confident in his competence. She abruptly holstered her sword again. Then she tried to remember all the techniques she possesses and use them in symbiosis. Now she had one more advantage, apart from having a sword. She could enhance her attacks with magic. The girl felt that her legs accelerated and her body became sharper and more powerful. She liked it very much and actively began to attack Kim. He also noticed that Erin had become much faster, but there was one caveat. There was no need to put more energy into your legs than they needed. She needs to learn to manage this energy that has appeared in her. She again prepared for the attack and returned to her original position. Erin considered her mistakes and listened to the boy. After that, she rushed to attack him again. She reduced the concentration of energy in her legs and tried to transfer it to the strike. Kim noted that this shot was really good and much more technical than the previous one. But when she stopped, her body relaxed and was not ready to attack in return. She needs to try to turn her body better. Another mistake was highlighted by Kim, and if she corrects it, it will be strongly reflected in the attacks. The guy asked to correct mistakes and attack immediately in order to work it out in practice. Although she had already dealt enough blows, her stamina was on a completely different level compared to the past. The girl made attack after attack, and she liked it. Each time she corrected one of her mistakes. And thanks to this, she could become stronger literally every minute. Since she worked out these mistakes in practice, it was easy for her to remember. The body gained experience and produced reflexes. Erin could destroy floors and walls with her punches. Kim continued to load her with work so that her brain would not have time to be distracted by other stimuli. With each stroke, her confidence improved, as did her technique. If you compare her on the first day of selection and now, they were completely different people. Thanks to Kim's training, she has become much more powerful. Although the boy was able to fend off her punches very easily, he felt that she had greatly improved her skills and improved on what was lagging behind. They continued to train. Aaron and Kim both enjoyed it and didn't want to stop. After they started training, the sun was already starting to set. The entire training hall was in ruins, but Aaron was very persistent. And she continued training, although her body could hardly stand on her feet. More than an hour had already passed, and Kim offered to end the training. As soon as the girl heard this, she immediately fell to the floor without strength. Kim wasn't even tired, although he noticed that Aaron's level had increased significantly. She believed that her current skill had been practiced much better than at any other time. The skills she possessed at the time of entry could not even be compared. But she was troubled by one more question that troubled her. Although she had increased her level several times, she still couldn't even come close to Kim's level. Of course, that's why she asked him to teach her fencing, because she saw his strength and technique. Aaron knew that if she competed with him at every training session, she would be able to progress even better. Therefore, she asked to add sparring to training next time. He thought about it and said he needed to think about it. He could benefit from communication with Aaron, and since she had talent, it was quite interesting and fun to teach her. Even during the exam, he noticed that she was familiar with some of the practices he knew. She also uses breathing techniques, but does it somehow differently? In any case, he would be able to regain his senses through familiar techniques. If she had asked to train her 300 years ago, he would have rewarded her with the opportunity to become his apprentice. But now was a completely different time. Aaron was a very persistent girl, so she asked again if they could compete next time. He decided to make a joke and said that he didn't want to. Aaron did not ask this question again, and the boy was surprised that she gave up so quickly. But she replied that she agreed with him because he was right. If she follows his advice, she will surely become even stronger. It was something new for him. They had finished training today. 2 weeks later, the Valhalla Stadium was full of students. Each of them dreamed of continuing their studies at this academy. But only the best will remain. It was Soen's first time at the stadium since the opening ceremony. All the students of the school were gathered there. Sihik didn't think there would be so many rides. As always, Aaron was emotionless and just waiting for everything to start. Kim did not understand at all why they were all gathered in this stadium. Barch said his homeroom teacher had been telling all the students about it as recently as 2 weeks ago. All the teachers gathered there, and Lemur was ready to tell about the procedure for holding intermediate exams. This time, the exam task will be an attack in the dungeon. They will have to unite in teams and go to an artificially created dungeon. The stadium began to disappear, and the appearance of a real dungeon was recreated around. Real entrances to dungeons were recreated for them. For each team separately. They could combine as they wished. The maximum number per team is 8 people, but each group can collect the composition individually. Marks will be awarded only based on their merit in this test. There will also be disqualification criteria in this competition. If they are unable to complete the task within the specified time, it will be completed automatically for them. They and the board of teachers chose the difficulty of the dungeon. It will be an F level. Now it's time to check what they have learned during this period at the academy. Time passed, and they needed to divide into teams first. They negotiated with each other and tried to form optimal teams. The teachers watched this. As expected, they were filled with emotions. They were interested in how the leaders of their school would show themselves. Soen led the team. Their binder wasn't strong enough. They needed to get another one. But she understood that she did not need to choose those who were stronger than her. For 8 people in the dungeon, 5 hours would be enough. It is much more important what contribution she will manage to make during this time. Among the 6 willing people, it was realistic to choose those who have good enough skills. In theory, everything was very easy, but it is also worth considering the issue of teamwork. Lemur expected that the child of the 5th generation was perfectly aware of the meaning of the exam task. But the rest of the students gathered in groups of 20 people. Or they usually enter the dungeon in a group of 8 people. If the team is poorly balanced, then fights appear in it. In about half an hour, all students will enter the dungeon. Teachers need to prepare for their assessment. Meanwhile, Kim stood alone and was in no rush to join anyone. He wondered if anyone had completed the exam immediately with a passing grade. He was flying in his thoughts as always. Kim turned his head and saw Erin standing next to him. He decided to approach her and ask if she had not found a team yet. The girl answered that she had not. But everyone had already gone to the dungeons, which she expected. The girl decided to do as he told her. Kim had no idea what she meant. Something strange has been happening to her lately. She is like a parrot repeating everything from the last training session. The guy said he would go himself and advised her to do the same. But she was not sure that she was ready to go alone. Kim thought that there would be nothing difficult. He turned and walked towards the nearest door leading to the dungeon. The girl stood and couldn't decide how to act in this situation. Would she be able to cope on her own because her strength was much less than Kim's? The guys from the other team noticed that Erin was left alone. One of them ran up to her and asked if her name was Erin. If she didn't have a team, he offered to join them. They were just one person short. The girl listened to him, but said that she was going to go to the dungeons herself. The guy asked not to do this, because she will be disqualified. Kim told her that it wasn't as hard as it looked, so she could handle it. The boys tried to stop her, but there was no point in it. Once she had made up her mind, no one could influence her. All students have already formed teams and gone to the dungeon. The teachers carefully observed the actions of each of the participants. Ligon had to watch his students, like every classroom teacher. Every student looked very scared. They saw monsters for the first time in their life. They managed to earn only a few points in a long period of time. In practice, everything seemed much more difficult than in the manuals. Each of them had their own dungeon performance statistics filled out by teachers. All students were shown on separate screens. Teachers must manage to distribute points between them for each activity. Many people may think that their quick score is very rough, but their scores are actually very fast and clear. No mistakes. Lemur was called the Master of Precision ever since he was a common soldier. He was truly a legendary contractor who had a 99 dungeon clearing rate. There is absolutely no need to doubt the professionalism of his evaluation. Thanks to all his regalia, he has the full right to issue any evaluations. He very carefully watched the actions of each student in the dungeon, and it could not necessarily be during the battle itself. All in all, Lemur felt that this year had given them enough good students. And the descendants of the 5th generation were also quite active. But one student stood out among them all. It was one of the daughters of prominent families, Soen. She very competently assembled the team and clearly led them during the battle. When the goblins attacked her team, due to proper positioning and management, they managed to destroy the enemy. She placed shield guards at the beginning for good protection and cover for archers and mages. Her leadership skills were at a higher level than her fighting skills. Everyone respected and trusted her, because she showed results.